All right, so as you undoubtedly know, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there were all kinds of rumors and conspiracy theories and debates and shadowy speculation about who might have been responsible for killing him. The person they charged and said acted alone, there's some evidence against him. It's not a very convincing case, but we're still at the beginning of the investigation. The evidence hasn't really presented to the public, but I'm just saying what we know is certainly something that ought to be questioned. I'm not saying it's clearly untrue. I'm just saying there's questions about it. And for a case of this magnitude with such repercussions, we have every right, in fact, the obligation to be skeptical about what we're being told. And one of the questions leading up to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, one of the questions afterwards about the events leading up to it was the extent to which he was being pressured and battled against by major pro-Israel donors and pro-Israel billionaires and by the Israeli government itself. And there's been a lot of reporting about Charlie being badgered and threatened and cajoled by people like Bill Ackman and pro-Israel billionaires who donated to Turning Point, who ended up withdrawing their support for Turning Point because Charlie hosted a debate just a few weeks or maybe a couple months before he was killed at the big Turning Point conference about Israel, where he had Josh Hammer, a super neocon Israel fanatical Israel supporter on the one side, and Dave Smith, a very aggressive Jewish critic of Israel on the other, and they debated Israel, and Dave Smith said things like Israel is committing genocide and the U.S. shouldn't be supporting them. The kind of thing that if you're a major pro-Israel billionaire donor to Turning Point, you don't want being aired. And they were even angrier that Charlie Kirk allowed Tucker Carlson to come and speak, that he invited Tucker Carlson to come and speak, and one of the main points of Tucker Carlson's speech was about the Epstein files and his belief that Jeffrey Epstein had a relationship with the Israeli government and specifically the Mossad, and they were indignant about that. They were telling Charlie Kirk, unless you promise to cut all ties with people like Tucker Carlson and not host people like Dave Smith, we're going to withdraw our funding from you. And Charlie was, by all accounts, defiant and said, I don't care, I'm not being told what to do, I'll invite whoever I want. And some people leapt to this conclusion that, we don't know anything, may be true, but I'm not at all someone who's affirming this or implying it, that because of his anger, because of the way he angered pro-Israel donors, and even because of the reaction that Charlie Kirk had in becoming less pro-Israel, that was one of the reasons why he got killed. Again, I'm not somebody who says that, but there are a lot of people who used it to say that. But either way, I think it's very important to understand the pressure that was being applied on him to understand the reality of our political culture. And you're talking about the single most influential person among young conservatives and a lot of independents too, the person who was the head of this massive, majorly funded organization. What he believed and didn't believe, what he advocated and opposed, it mattered a lot to a lot of very powerful people. And so, again, it doesn't have to impact on the question of who killed him to be really important to understand what kind of pressures was he under. And remember, he went on Megyn Kelly's show. One of the last interviews he gave, and both of them, but Charlie Kirk in particular, were enraged by the fact that they were being cajoled and hectored and pressured and accused and maligned by Israel supporters, saying, you're not supporting Israel enough, I think you're anti-Semitic. And Charlie was enraged in this interview saying, how dare you call me anti-Semitic? And Megyn was saying the same thing. And both of them were saying, you may lose us if you keep this up. We're not going to stay supportive of your cause while you're demanding that we become even more loyal to your agenda. So I heard that interview at the time. I commented on it that he gave with Megyn. It was Charlie Kirk in his own words saying that. And it was right after this weekend summit hosted by Bill Ackman at Bill Ackman's massive sprawling estate in the Hamptons, where a bunch of pro-Israel influencers like Josh Hammer and others were present. And by all accounts, they were trying to persuade Charlie to become more pro-Israel, to cut his ties with these people. And then the next day he goes on Megyn Kelly's show and he starts angrily denouncing the pressure campaign on him. You can say it's unrelated to that Bill Ackman weekend. Doesn't seem likely to me. It was the day after. Meanwhile, Candace Owens, who is somebody who knew Charlie very well, for a long time, no question they were friends. She has been strongly suggesting and outright stating that a lot of what is being claimed about Charlie and his support for Israel is deceitful. she did claim that the letter that Netanyahu was holding around and whirling around to say Charlie was Israel's best friend, she claimed that that letter was, parts of that letter were actually contrary to what Netanyahu was saying. And then they released the full letter, and it basically was Charlie telling Netanyahu, I'm a huge supporter of Israel, but I'm very concerned about the lack of support, the loss of support that you're suffering in the United States, and here are the things I want you to do that you should do to better your communications, to recapture Americans to be on your side. It wasn't really a letter critical of Israel, but it was a critique of their communication strategy. But it was written as like, I'm a friend of Israel. Here's what I think you should do to have better PR among Americans. So I don't think that panned out, at least in my view. I haven't heard Candace's explanation about that. But one of the things she's been saying is that there are texts where Charlie went even further than he did on Megyn Kelly's show, talking about the pressure that was being applied to him by pro-Israel donors and what his reaction was, what he was threatening to do as a result, namely abandon his support for Israel. And a lot of people were saying Candace Owens is lying. There are no such texts. And yesterday on her show, Candace Owens released these texts. And at the time I was, skeptical. I wanted to see them be confirmed, their authenticity confirmed. And they have been by the head of Turning Point USA, Andrew Colvett, as we're about to show you, as we'll show you after. But the authenticity has been confirmed. That's why I'm talking about that. And these are real. And these are texts. We'll let Candace show you in her own words.
Take a look. So Charlie writes in this group chat, just lost another huge Jewish donor, $2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace. Somebody writes, oh. Charlie writes, Jewish donors play into all of the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause.
Leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause, which again is a much more blatant and explicit expression of that thought than the one that he expressed on Megyn Kelly's show. But what he said on Megyn Kelly's show was very similar to that. It was just a little more subtle, a little more obscured and nuanced, but not much. So he's saying, I can't stand it anymore. These pro-Israel donors, I think they can demand and manipulate me to talk to people they want me to talk to and not talk to people I don't want to. They're pushing me in the other direction. I just lost another $2 million donation because of this from a Jewish billionaire, a big Jewish donor. And he said Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes, meaning they use their money to coerce people into supporting Israel. And he said, this is leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. This was in the days before he was assassinated. Here's the rest of what Candace shows.
And somebody writes, a donor writes, please do not invite Candace. That might feel good short term, but it's not good long term, in my opinion. Like all groups, you're going to get a wide variety of opinions. That nasty free will thing that God bestowed on us makes life frustrating at times after the dust settles a bit, maybe. So again, this is 48 hours before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was very clear and he was very explicit, and he did not back down, not in that Hamptons meeting, which they're all lying about, nor in this text thread. I'm not going to reveal the names of the other 7. Actually, you know what? I disagree with myself 4 seconds ago. Let's just throw in Josh Hammer for funsies. He's on this chat, okay?
So Josh Hammer is, like I said, a fanatical supporter of Israel. He was the one that was invited to debate Dave Smith. Josh Hammer used to write to me all the time, praise my work. He was an editor at the time at Newsweek. He said, please come and write for Newsweek. Your work is fantastic. It's so uniquely valuable. This is before October 7th. And then after October 7th, I forget what prompted it, but he sent me a DM basically saying, you're an evil, horrible person. I was criticizing Israel, his beloved country, and I take back all the praise I ever expressed for you. He's like, yeah, before you were doing something unimportant. You were talking about the United States and the rights of Americans. And I like that, but relative to Israel, that wasn't important. The real issue is Israel, and now that you're critical of Israel, I think you have no value. And I think he stopped following me on Twitter or blocked me or whatever, but sent me that kind of nasty note. I just, maybe it was on Twitter itself. I believe it was by DMs. But in any event, that's who Josh Hammer is. And he was part of this chat. Now, here's Andrew Colvett, who was Charlie's right-hand man, the highest-ranking person at Turning Point after Charlie. Obviously somebody who understands exactly what happened. He was Charlie Kirk's producer for the show as well. And so he went on the Charlie Kirk show today to address these texts that were released. And here's what he said.
Started the show to address some of the things that have been going around on public, namely about a group text chain that has been made known and released by Candace Owens. And I just want to address it head on because, that was a screen grab that I had shared with people. So it is authentic. And I want to go into it because I actually am really excited that the truth is out there.
Now, I don't know what he went on to say. I should have checked. If I had to guess, since he's been really downplaying this a lot, in part because it's in his interest to do so. I'm not questioning his integrity, but he needs Talking Point to continue. He wants Talking Point to continue. He is employed by Talking Point. And my guess is Turning Points. I don't know why I keep saying Talking Point. Turning Point. He wants it to continue, and so he has an interest in placating its current donors. But I don't want to represent what he went on to say. That's my guess based on hearing him say other things. But the important point for our purposes is that he said this is an authentic part of the chat. And a lot of people were claiming Candace Owens was lying. They were mocking her when she was saying she had receipts. Like I said, Candace, like everybody, makes mistakes. I think what she said about the Netanyahu letter, once we saw the full Netanyahu letter, assuming that's the full Netanyahu letter, it wasn't quite Charlie expressing opposition to Israel, more criticizing them for not being better at communicating. But Candace is also right about a lot of things, and she has a lot of sources. And I know Candace, I don't want to say well, let's say reasonably well. And she is a serious person insofar as her ability to get facts, to get documents. When she showed this text, I was pretty sure it was authentic, just knowing how she operates and knowing who she knows and her connections and the like. I just didn't want to myself vouch for that until I heard confirmation. Now we have confirmation that it was authentic. So again, it doesn't mean that there's evidence now that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, but I think it's pretty significant that this young, extremely influential conservative who was pretty much groomed from the time he was 18, people saw his charisma and his abilities to become kind of this charismatic conservative leader for young people to basically evangelize on behalf of MAGA and Donald Trump in a way that, by all accounts, was very successful. Charlie Kirk was very well known among especially this younger cohort of voters. He obviously could inspire huge amounts of people. He was very influential. He spoke regularly to Donald Trump, to Benjamin Netanyahu. And if Charlie Kirk was being driven into a more anti-Israel stand, either because his generation that he represents has moved there, which they have, and he felt, as Megan suggested afterward, obligated to kind of go with them and to give voice to what they were saying. And you might have remembered he assembled a panel of younger Talking Point affiliates, members, and Talking Points, Turning Point, I don't know why I keep doing that, members and affiliates and the like to talk about Israel, and a lot of them expressed the view, like, yeah, we don't hate Israel, we don't hate Jews, but why are we financing Israel? Like, I thought we were America first. And he was clearly delving deeper into this debate as a debate, not any longer as dogma. He was hardcore pro-Israel for a long time, but definitely changed in the months leading up to his assassination. And so when he's saying privately, Jewish billionaires are living up to this stereotype, that's his words, not mine, by demanding that I be as absolutely pro-Israel as possible or they're going to threaten to withdraw their money, and some of them did, and then explicitly says that is going to drive me to abandon the pro-Israel cause. That in and of itself is significant, just as a development to demonstrate how much pressure there is with regard to this foreign country on pretty much everybody of any degree of influence. When we've been talking about Larry Ellison buying up CBS and CBS News and Paramount, putting Barry Weiss at the head of CBS News, trying to buy CNN, but assuming a lot of control over TikTok. And it absolutely matters the extent of this influence. And Charlie Kirk, in his own voice, in so many ways, including these texts that Candace just released that have been authenticated by Turning Point, all illustrate the same thing about the intensity and depth of this pressure that gets applied to American citizens, basically trying to force them to maintain support for a foreign country. And this investigation will unfold, and we'll hear and see all the evidence as they prosecute the suspect that they've arrested for Charlie's killing. I'm sure there will be lots of inquiries and investigations into whether there were people involved with him, whether he was the sole shooter, whether there were other people involved, whether he's a patsy. There always are in these kinds of politically important murders, and there should be, given their repercussions. But what we know in and of itself, for sure, what we already knew, and what we know even more now, the extent and severity of it, as a result of these texts released by Candace Owens, just deserves attention in and of itself. And that's why we thought it was important to give it, and we'll continue to give it attention as more of this is released. Candace says there are more texts. I've heard there are more texts. I'm sure they'll be coming out soon, and we will definitely keep covering it, given its importance. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.